Hello students, this is Dr. Harshit Srivastava, Assistant Professor in area of Economics. So in our last lecture, we discussed about revenue receipts, capital receipts, revenue expenditure, capital expenditure under the ambiguity of budget, which ultimately was part of fiscal policy. Now, extending to that, we have concept of deficit. Most of the time you must have heard about deficit. So what is deficit? When your revenue is less than your expenditure, you will face shortages. Those shortages are known as deficit. So if we categorize deficit, we will find revenue deficit. So what is revenue deficit? Revenue deficit is excess of revenue expenditure over revenue receipts. What are revenue expenditure? Revenue expenditure are those expenditure which neither leads to creation of any assets nor leads to reduction in liabilities. Similar is revenue receipts. So the difference between when expenditure, that is revenue expenditure, is greater than revenue receipt, that is revenue deficit. Then we have effective revenue deficit. Effective revenue deficit is the difference between revenue deficit and grant for creation of capital assets. Now this is very important. What happens is that government transfers some money to state government. Union government transfers some money as grant to state government. And in union budget, you must have seen this, that particular grant is counted under revenue part because it neither leads to creation of any asset or reduction in any liability. Then what happens is states, they also incur some capital expenditure. So we have to reduce that part to come to the effective revenue deficit. Then we have fiscal deficit. This is very important. It is the difference between revenue receipts plus non-debt capital receipts and total expenditure. In simple words, our fiscal deficit is equal to total borrowings. That is the total obligation on government. And you will be surprised to know this, that in Indian budget, total fiscal deficit, that is our total borrowings, are almost 35% of the total expenditure. This means we still borrow around 35% to finance our expenditures. Then we have primary deficit. What's it? Primary deficit is the fiscal deficit less than interest payment. When we reduce interest payment from this fiscal deficit, we get a primary deficit. Now, so these are the actual figures of Union Budget 2022-2023. In the last column, you will be seeing that 2023-24 budget estimates total revenue deficit are 8,69,855 crores. This is the difference between revenue expenditure and revenue receipts. This means revenue expenditure are exceeding revenue receipts by 8,69,000. Similar is the condition with effective revenue deficit. Now you must have noticed this, that the total effective revenue deficit is less than total revenue deficit. Then we have fiscal deficit, that is 17,86,816. And as I said, this is nothing but the total borrowings. Then we have primary deficit of 7,06,845 crore rupees. So students are also interested in knowing this, that from where we finance our budget, or from where what are the sources of revenue and expenditure of government budget. So these are the sources of revenue and expenditure. Under receipt part, you will be knowing this, as I explained, 34. If we have to collect 1 rupee as revenue, then we have to go for 34 paisa as borrowing. So total borrowing is around 34 paisa, that is 34% of the union budget. Similar is the condition with the tax revenue. The tax revenue includes corporation tax, GST, then we have union excise, customs, income tax. So these are approximately 50%. Apart from that, non-tax revenue receipts are approximately 10%, and rest is borrowings. When we go to the expenditure part, then you will find this, that for centrally sponsored scheme, the total budget allocation is around 9%. Central sector scheme, that is around 17%, that is over 25% in schemes. But the most disturbing part is this interest payment. That is, government of India is paying 20% as interest for paying their loan. Remember this thing, interest payment is not leading to reduction in liabilities. So this is the most hectic part. Then we have defense and subsidies. These are not fruitful expenditure, but they are required for our security purpose. Then we have finance commission, that is 9%. We generally include state devolution in that. Then we have state share in taxes and duties and pensions. So these are sources of revenue and expenditure, that is receipts and expenditure. So I think every point is clear now regarding budget, fiscal policy. So thank you so much for hearing me.